What's up, boys? Today I want to talk to y'all about my first impressions about Final Fantasy XIV. I just got done playing the game for about, I'm really not sure about how many hours. I think I played it total about 30, 40 hours, maybe a little bit less, a little bit more. And I'm like level 43, almost done with the Realm Reborn. And I wanted to give those real, actual, legitimate first impressions of the game. What I thought was good, what I thought was bad, and everything else in between. Now, overall, I want to say that the experience of playing the game and like the meta around it, not just the game, but like me streaming the game, people talking about me playing the game, that shit has blown me away. Holy shit, you guys love this. Like, I didn't expect to get like over 200,000 viewers playing the game on my first day. That was incredible. Thank you. If you watched that stream, I really appreciate it. And people have come back. They've come back every day to watch. I really do appreciate that too. That is incredible. It's so weird to me, right? Because for the longest time, I just streamed WoW. I just played WoW. And now I'm playing Final Fantasy as well. And then, oh shit, now New World's coming out. And then, oh, wait a minute, Ashes of Creation Alpha is coming out before that. And it's like, oh my god. When it rains, it pours. That's basically the way that I feel. So it's a good thing, by the way. A rainy day keeps the shower away. So anyway, I want to kind of talk a little bit about the positives and negatives about the game. I think that the worst thing about Final Fantasy XIV is buying the game. And I really mean this. I think that is the genuine worst thing about it. Using their website and trying to figure out oh, well, you have a Square Enix account, but you don't have a Final Fantasy account. Oh, well, you have to buy this, but if you buy it on Steam, then it's different. Like, what the fuck? Like, just make it simple. It's like Blizzard, okay? Like, one thing that they do right is they make it easy to give them money, okay? And I would love if Square Enix could at least get their shit together a little bit with that, because I'll be honest, it took me 2 or 3 hours to try to figure out how all to do all that stuff. I had to buy one of the games twice. It was really annoying, and just overall, it's confusing, it's contrived, and it's hard to understand, I think, for many people. And I think that also, especially with so many people coming into the game now because of the state of WoW and just in general people talking about it, and Endwalker coming out in November, there's going to be a lot of people excited to play the game, and what an awful barrier to entry if giving them money is hard to do. So I really think they need to redo their payment system and the way that that works, and just make it easier for people to understand. But other than that, there aren't really a whole lot of like really big negatives. I remember the 2.5 second GCD. This is something that I was kind of I was very skeptical that this would be a problem, because I assumed that whenever you have a GCD that's quite long like that, there are always going to be abilities like interrupts, like stuns, etc., that have to be split second abilities that you would use in between that. So it's not really like a 2.5 second GCD. It's like every 2.5 seconds you use a main ability, and then you can use filler abilities inside of that, which is effectively the way the game works. And I think that the combat seems fine. The lack of add-ons is definitely odd for me as a WoW player. It's harder for me to get used to that, because as a WoW player, the first thing you do if you're playing a game, it's like, oh, well, I can't play this on your computer because it doesn't have my 15 different add-ons with my 50 different settings and my 30 different weak auras and my 8 different, like calibrations here. Like, it's very, very complicated. And with Final Fantasy, you're just using the base default UI. And of course, there are a few things you can get that are more advanced, that are apparently add-ons, etc. But I haven't really wasted my time doing that because I just don't really find it necessary. Well, anyway, I want to go through each of the different, tenets of the game and talk about what my first impressions of them were. Now, the first thing is the story. And I think the story is actually very interesting in the way that it's told, because I was thinking a lot about this. And what is the difference, and why is it that Final Fantasy, it's easier to tell a story in Final Fantasy, and why does it do that? Because people told me that A Realm Reborn was going to suck. And I'm like, if the questing sucks, there's no way it can be worse than Classic WoW. And I was right. It wasn't that bad. It was completely fine. And I read a few threads about this, and people are talking about, oh man, he's never going to be able to do this 3 quests that are super boring. It's like, what are you talking about? Like, I've done that for weeks on like 10 levels before in Classic WoW. It's been no big deal for me personally as as an older player, but I can definitely see where the monotony would absolutely set in. But anyway, why is it Why is it that the dungeons, why is not dungeons, excuse me, why the quests and the story in Final Fantasy, why is it that those things are told in such a more easily digestible format than what they do in WoW? And I think the difference is very simple. It's the difference between a tweet and a twit longer. And WoW tells their story in twit longers, and Final Fantasy tells their stories in tweets. Basically, what I mean by that is that whenever you are listening to the Final Fantasy dialogue, it is giving you information in this about this much of a little box, right? Meanwhile, whenever you do WoW, it's this much of a box. And you read the first two lines and you're like, okay, what's the objective? But in Final Fantasy, because many times the information is very short and it's presented to you in very bite-sized formats, it makes it easier to digest for the user, and I think that it also makes it easier for people to understand the story because it's being given to them in these very specific increments. And I think also creating the dialogues between the different characters and the in-game cutscenes does give people a better way to personify who those characters are and give a better idea of who's saying what and who feels what way. So I do think it really matters to do that, and in Final Fantasy I really do feel that they've done a very good job with that. Now, another element with this, so storytelling overall, I think that it is great. I like the storytelling. And one of the things about the storytelling that I think is very interesting, and this is something that probably one of the main reasons why I wanted to make this video is to share this idea that I've had, is that I believe that storytelling is actually one of the reasons why Final Fantasy doesn't have as much of a, quote, toxic community as World of Warcraft. And I don't necessarily think this is maybe entirely true in all ways, but I want to draw a distinction between the way that Final Fantasy deals with antagonists versus the way that World of Warcraft deals with antagonists. Almost every single time in Final Fantasy, especially in the early quests, that you have an antagonist, there is a point where the antagonist comes to a realization that they have done something wrong, and then after that there is generally a point of mercy where people think, oh, well, you know, he gets it, he understands, we're going to give him a second chance. So in so many cases in Final Fantasy, there is a element of forgiveness, there is an element of redemption, whereas in World of Warcraft, there is an element of retribution and execution much more often than there is. And I think that just telling a narrative in the way that you create the idea that people are, you know, redeemable, and you have somebody does something really bad, everybody's really mad at them, and they're given forgiveness, I think that in a very, very subtle way sets the tone for interactions in the game. And I think in a way that does kind of create a paradigm in which to interact with each other in the game. And I think that having that narrative where players are not just instantly executed for doing something wrong, or, you know, most quest lines do not end in the person that's causing the trouble being put in jail or destroyed or killed or something like that. I think the end result of that is a more understanding player base because they've been conditioned to feel that way through the narratives in the game. And I find it very interesting that that's the case. And I've seen that more and more and more, because whenever I was first questing, it's like, oh, well, this guy's doing some stupid shit. Man, all right, I can't wait to kill him at the end of it. And then at the end of it, they just give him a pat on the back and they say, listen, man, we knew you were misunderstood. Hopefully you can get your shit back together. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. I thought we were going to take him to the back of the barn and shoot him. And it doesn't even happen. And I think it's a very subtle and it's a very removed way of thinking about things, especially whenever you're taking narrative decisions in the story and comparing them to player behavior. But I do think that it does rub off in a very specific way, especially with how important many of the players in Final Fantasy view the story. So let's go ahead and talk about combat. Combat, I actually think combat it's about the same, really. I think WoW has great combat. That's really the truth. I think that it's got really, really well-designed combat. It's extremely responsive. When you hit a button, it does something, and there's no delay at all about it. And I think that even some of the most staunch Blizzard dislikers, let's just say, not haters, just dislikers, some of the most staunch Blizzard dislikers can they're going to have to admit that, like, Blizzard and World of Warcraft is an extremely responsive game, unless you have more than 5 players in an area. But other than that, if you're just playing with a few other people, it is extremely responsive. When you hit a button, your character does something immediately. And I think that that is one element of Blizzard quality that has actually stood the test of time. So Final Fantasy, I think, is close to that. It definitely is, but especially with like off GCD abilities like interrupts and stuns, I don't think that they have the same responsiveness that World of Warcraft does. But that could also just be me not really understanding it quite as well. I think I'll probably have to give you guys an update on that once I hit level 80. Now, in terms of goals in the game, my goals in Final Fantasy, I think that some people before I started playing the game did not believe this, but my goals in Final Fantasy are to clear ultimate fights. I'm not planning on hitting level 80 and then quitting the game. And I think more and more, the more that I know life, the worst parts of the questing experience, and still somehow manage to enjoy them, the more that some of my more fervent detractors will have to come to the realization that that might actually happen. So I'm very excited about that. Honestly, I've been watching some of the fights just on different people's channels, etc. And I am so excited to do the raids. I think they're so cool. And it's the thing is with me and WoW is like I used to really, really love to raid. And the worst part about raiding for me is the other people, right? Like, I love doing the fights, but whenever I've got Billy the dipshit who just keeps standing in the fire, and I'm spending 3 hours of my day, 3 days a week, waiting on Billy to figure out that the fire's hot, I'm not necessarily having a good time. So that's been a big problem that I've had with WoW raiding. And Final Fantasy, you have less people in Ultimates. I think it's 8 people instead of 20 in Mythics. So hopefully we can be a little bit more specific in who we're going to invite in and who we're going to let in. And I really am actually looking forward to progressing through the Mythic system, or not Mythic, the Ultimate and Savage, and I think Extreme systems for some of the older fights in Final Fantasy. Like, this is something that I'm genuinely excited about and genuinely looking forward to. And it's not even really about the armor. Like, the armor is cool, and don't get me wrong. Like, we're definitely going to be talking about the armor a little bit here. But it's mostly just about being able to do the fights. I feel like many of the fights in Final Fantasy have not really challenged me, I feel like, as a player. And so I'm really waiting to get to that point where I'm like, fuck, okay, this is actually hard. And I'm not, the greatest player ever. So I think that it will probably happen at a certain point, probably soon. Other than that, I think mounts are definitely very interesting in Final Fantasy, considering the fact that all of them can fly, and it's not just the ones with wings. There is literally an elephant that flies. So this is it is a little bit silly to me. I'm going to be honest with you. It is a little bit silly to me, but it's one of those things you don't really think about a whole lot. I don't really give a shit that much. It was something that I thought would be more annoying than it was, and the reason why I think it's not that annoying is Final Fantasy is like, it's basically the highest form of fantasy fiction that there is. So you have like these giant airships, these giant monsters with metallic metal swords that are coming out, and they're like katanas, and there's fire coming off of them. And then you see an elephant flying around, and it's like, yeah, of course the elephant's flying. It's not that big of a deal. So in the scope of Final Fantasy, elephants literally flying, pigs flying, is actually not that crazy at all. So I'm really worried about that too much. Then in terms of the community has been, you guys know, my community experiences in Final Fantasy have been very colorful, and there has been a lot of people that have been a little bit annoying, but shout out to Square Enix. They've actually done a good job at trying to at least try to give me as much of a normal experience as possible. There were a number of people trying to grief me and just stream snipe me and just generally be annoying as possible, like try to get on the screen and cover up as much of my screen as possible so I couldn't see anything. And they did do a good job. The GMs did a great job at kind of taking care of those people and putting them in timeout, which is something that I was very, very glad about, and something that, in my opinion, should happen in all games. And either way, community has been, I think, completely fine. I think Final Fantasy definitely it's hit the mark of being that place that you can log in and hang out in. And I think that's one thing that a lot of the more casual MMORPG players definitely feel at home with, because they can log in, hang out with their friends, maybe do a quest, maybe do a dungeon or something like that, and there's not as much of high stakes with it. And I think that high stakes is another element. This is probably the last thing that I want to talk about with the Final Fantasy First Impressions, is high stakes is definitely it's a spectrum. And so let's talk about really, really, really high stakes. Let's talk about Classic WoW with full world buffs. If you wipe the raid in Classic WoW with full world buffs, people are fucking pissed. They are furious because they've spent hours preparing for this, and especially before the Chronoboon Displacers, they had to log off all week to make sure that they didn't lose these buffs so they could do the raid the following Tuesday. And then finally they get to the raid and somebody fucks it up and they lose all of their work that they've been looking forward to for the entire week. So you have that much loss and you can lose that much, and you get massive toxicity. You have people that get really, really angry about that because they lose so much through wiping. And also, I think a little bit of a lesser extent here, let's talk about Mythic Plus. Why is Mythic Plus a little bit more toxic than, let's say, Dungeons in Final Fantasy? It's very simple, because if you fuck up a dungeon in Final Fantasy, you just get somebody else in the group and it's not a big deal. But if you fuck up a Mythic Plus, you lose your key and it gets depleted. So the element of scarcity, the element of loss, is a little bit more prevalent in World of Warcraft, and because of that, that scarcity creates pressure, and that pressure creates toxicity. And I think Final Fantasy takes the pressure off in a lot of those cases and doesn't create those lose conditions that are so punishing for players that it makes them resent each other. And I think that is a very, very impactful thing. And I actually think that Blizzard should look at that and try to create more challenging boss fights, and rather than creating more punishing boss fights. I'd rather be challenged than punished. I guess that's kind of a good way to look at it. But of course, there's a lot more to it as well. But anyway, my experience overall with the game has actually been very good. I've had fun with it. I've enjoyed it. My stream has enjoyed it. And it's a great feeling as a streamer. I'm sure you guys, if you stream before, you'd know this. But even if you haven't, it's very easy to relate to this or understand this, that it's a great feeling that you get involved with a game and you really like playing a game, and it turns out that your stream really likes watching it. There's no weird thing where you're playing this game that you don't want to and you're doing it because of your stream. No. Or it's no thing where you're, playing this game that you do want to and your stream's hating it and they're complaining about it. And I think it's great. I'm really happy about it. And I've also, one thing that's really been heartening for me and very positively uplifting is the fact that I've had a lot of people that are, they're first-time Final Fantasy viewers, and they're willing to try out, and give my WoW content a chance. Watch a transmog comp, or, watch a new dungeon or something like that, and just try to enjoy the content and appreciate the genre of MMOs for what it has to be, rather than the tribalism that I think has actually just made it's made the entire space worse. It's made the community worse as a whole. And I think one of my main goals with all of this is to try to give people the perspective that you can love multiple games, you can have fun in multiple games, and you can appreciate multiple games. It doesn't necessarily have to be a zero-sum environment. And I've really enjoyed playing this other game. It's been super fun for me. I'm super excited for Ashes of Creation. I'm even excited about other games like Palia and Crowfall too, and as well as other RPGs too. I think that playing Final Fantasy has given me a lot of confidence with streaming, and I'm very glad that it's gone so well, and I look forward to doing other games similar to that as well in the future. So I want to say thank you guys, everybody who's been so supportive and everything. I've really enjoyed playing the game, and also I look forward to continuing playing as well. And so overall, it's been a pretty fun experience. It's been more fun than I had expected, and I've actually just enjoyed myself. It's really just that simple. So anyway, guys, that's pretty much all I've got. Thank you very much for watching. I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are on about it. I know a lot of people have talked to me about it already, but I wanted to make a video and just kind of share a little bit more of a expanded view of how I felt about the game. So anyway, guys, overall, TLDR, game good. Thank you all very much for watching. Really appreciate it. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.